session.
Thank you, Anu.
Thank you, Dr. Anupama, and we are very happy to have Professor Brown and Ms. Nandini here today with us. Professor Brown, thank you so much for joining us, and we are really looking forward for your very interesting session. In fact, the topic that you have mentioned is extremely very eye-catching, and we all are very keen towards listening to you today. Thank you so much for giving your time.
Ma'am, we were already, we had I'm sorry for a bad throat. But we already had, heard from Mr. Brown, from Dr. Brown during the leadership forum.
During this
It was a
yes.
pleasure listening to you, and we look forward to a very interesting session now.
That's a very bad throat, Pooja. Don't make it very bad.
Yes, today.
A real bad throat I'm having today. So sorry, excuse me for that.
Not at all, not at all. And thank you for both of you for the time that you took out from your busy schedules, I'm sure. So, yeah, Manav, can you take on formally, please?
Sure, ma'am. Should I start with the permission?
Yeah, please.
A very good afternoon and namaskar to each and present here. We extend a very warm welcome on behalf of Amity Business School family. We thank you for taking our time and joining us virtually for the second edition of the Mega Lecture International Series 2022. In this series of international lectures of academic stalwarts who share their fathomless knowledge and acumen to enlighten all present. We thank Honorable Founder President Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, Honorable Chancellor and President Dr. Atul Chauhan, and Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Dr. Balwinder Shukla ma'am, who gave us this platform to conduct this event. We would also like to welcome Professor Dr. Sanjeev Bansal sir, Dean of Faculty of Management Studies and Director of Amity Business School. Now, we would request Professor Dr. Anupama Rajesh ma'am, Head of Internationalization Cell and Professor at Amity University, to say a few words about Mega International Lecture Series.
I'll request, I'll pass on my responsibility to Dr. Jaya because I want this to be an HR interaction. So Dr. Jaya, just a few words on anything that you would want to say because Professor Brown is a stalwart.
In fact, we're really keen, looking forward towards listening to him because the topic that he's talking about why, a brain, is required for doing business. So this is a very, I would say, eye-catching, title that you've mentioned out here, and we are really looking forward because ultimately, what matters is the mindset, the right mindset to begin with. Either you go for employment or you go for your own business. What really matters is the attitude, the brain, the functioning of the brain. So we're all very keen, Professor Brown, to listen to you all. And we are very hopeful that today we'll take a lot of food for thought and it's going to be a very interesting session.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the kind words, ma'am. Now, let's take a quick journey down memory lane with a short flashback video of our last session of Mega International Lecture Series 2022.
So there is a series of lectures that we have done with stalwarts in the earlier session of Mega International Lecture Series. So 7 with heads, deans, experts from various fields. And we've had a great run last year and we hope to replicate it this year. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Building on that, today joining with us is a renowned academician, Dr. Professor Paul Brown, Chairman and Managing Director of Ion Consulting International Private Limited. Now, I would like to call upon Dr. Anupama Rajesh, ma'am, to introduce our edu-writing speaker for the session. Ma'am.
Right. So it is my pleasure and honor to introduce to the gathering Professor Paul Brown. He is the Chairman and Managing Director of Ion Consulting International Pte Limited. As a practicing clinical and organizational psychologist, in 2008 he held the world's first visiting professorial appointment in organizational neuroscience in London South Bank University, following his visiting professorship in individual and organizational psychology at Nottingham Law School. He's now a professor of organizational neuroscience, Monart Business School, Switzerland, and visiting professor at Henley Business School, UK, and attached to 3 other UK universities for higher degree supervision. He taught annually at the UK Royal College of Defence Studies for 25 years and has taught as a guest lecturer in the Fulbright Howard Kennedy Economics Teaching Program in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. With a long-standing professional advisory interest in how family businesses are handed over to the next generation and innovation, creativity, startups and incubators, his own research interest within the framework of applied neuroscience focuses on how to track energy flow in organizations and developing an integrated theory of the individual and the organization. He is also the founder and principal instructor of the unique professional development program for senior coaches. Science of the Art Coaching, which has over 150 alumni spread globally and is one of its kind. Practicing for the past 50 years, not only as clinical and organizational psychologist, but also as an executive coach and supervisor, he has in recent time co-authored Neuropsychology for Coaches, Understanding the Basics, River Dragon, Neuroscience for Leadership, Harnessing the Brain Advantage, and so on. He has been an MD of a consulting firm across Europe, taught annually at the UK's Royal College of Defence Studies, sat on private banking board, has a long-standing professional advisory interest in how family businesses are handed over to the next generation, and supports wherever he can innovation, creativity, startups, and incubators. I could go on and on, but I won't take too much of the time and hand over the session to Dr. Professor Paul Brown, Chairman and Managing Director of the IM Consulting International Private Limited. Professor Brown. Is he having a trouble Can you hear it? Nandini, I think there's a problem with the meeting.
I'm trying to solve it.
Yeah, no problem. Take it.
Dr. Anupama, Dr. Paul's had a power outage just now. So he's trying to basically restore the electricity line. He lives in Laos.
So, Nandini, if you could just talk a little bit about the story in me, even that or any of the thoughts that you must have shared with Professor Brown, until that time he can join.
Yeah, just give me 2 minutes so that I can ensure that, he...
And also because we know that even you have a lot to bring on the table.
Yes.
So if you could just, so we can take it from you till the time Professor Brown is just getting his work done.
Okay.
Or maybe he can even join from a mobile. We'll hear his voice till the time he can connect virtually.
We're almost there.
Yeah, okay.
This is really unfortunate.
No problem. We can, if he's having trouble, he can join from a mobile.
Can you give a phone line so that he can speak? How will it work? Sorry.
So what he can do is that he can log in to the Teams app in his mobile.
Okay, I think this Teams app is the one creating a little bit of a glitch for him because he usually speaks on Zoom. Just
He
one
can
second.
log into Teams with his mobile and just talk through that.
Paul, can you go back to hello? 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 Hello?
Students, Avi, thank you for your patience. Please understand he's a world-renowned academic of a very senior category, so maybe we must be having some kind of technological challenges. So we thank you.
Okay, he's trying to get in.
I think he's there. Professor Brown, sorry, welcome. He's very much there.
Can you hear him?
No, I can't hear him. He's on mute, but I can hear you. Just tell him to unmute himself, and we are almost there.
Can you give him the speaker thing?
He's already there. He's got a mic. All that he has to do is just press the mic again. Yeah, so we can see Professor Brown. Professor Brown, welcome. Just now unmute yourself.
I have unmuted myself.
Yes, and we can hear you. Thank you so much.
Share screen.
Yes, please do. We're all very eager to hear your thoughts.
Can you now see my screen?
We can see you and we can hear you. At the moment, we can't see your screen.
Is there a screen share that I need?
Yes, right next to the red on the right, extreme right, there's a share. And I'm going to unshare mine so that, right to the red, next to the red on the leave, there's a share button. Just press that and you're done.
I'm terribly sorry that I can't see the share button.
On the extreme right, next to the leave button. Or if you give me your presentation or just email it to me, I'll run it for you.
Paul, it's that that arrow which looks upward. Can you see that arrow which looks upward in the
extreme
panel?
Right top.
It says open share tray.
Oh, yes.
Yes, so that is the one to be clicked. And then you will see screen share desktop in purple. That is the one to be clicked.
Nandini, if you want, you can just mail it to me and I'll run it for you.
I'm opening the share tray.
Yeah, so just run the PPT. You've shared your screen. All that you need to do is just run the PPT.
Okay.
Just run the PPT. We'll be able to see it.
Do you have my screen now?
We have you now.
You have my screen?
Yeah.
Good.
Just run the PPT.
Wonderful. My serious apologies to everybody. I hope my brain is working better than the electricity in the country in which I live. Why does anybody in business need to know about the brain? And thank you to Amity for inviting me to make this international presentation. I'm delighted to be with you and discovered Amity over recent months. Without people, there is no business, but each person is a unique, independent operating system. Think if you were going to set up a dealing room in a big financial institution and every computer had a different operating system. By and large, that is what comes into your organization, sits at their desks at home and zooms in if you're lucky. Everybody has a different operating system. And so the extraordinary task in management is how do we get all these independent operating systems functioning towards the strategic and operating goals of the organization? And then think of the costs of hiring people, actually hiring their brains, because the brain is the master controller of the way the person behaves. And so I want to suggest to you that these observations raise some rather fundamental questions, which I want to explore a little with you today. Who is this person? How did she or he become the person that she is, or might become the person that she might be? What am I actually buying when I hire anybody into the organization? The amount of time and effort and energy that we put into looking for talent, into hiring processes, into hoping we've made the right choices, and how often the hire that we've made, particularly the more senior that we get into the hiring process, the more senior the person that we're trying to hire, with the big impact that a senior appointment can have beneficially or adversely. What an extraordinary process. But the simplest way of thinking about this extraordinary thing called the human being is that it's a self-regulating system. And it's very much easier to close the system down than to open it up. I'm going to demonstrate to you how and why that is the case. But I want to suggest to you that this is an extraordinary moment in the development of knowledge. This century, and particularly this last 10 years, and it's what I've called a Newtonian moment. You will all know from whatever you can remember of physics in your school days, we'll all know who Newton was. This extraordinary man wrote this great volume in 1687, 330 years ago, Principia Mathematica. And he laid the foundations for what we now understand to be experimental method. It used to be called experimental philosophy. Before that, it was just philosophy. It was just ideas. But Newton and his colleagues turned it into being systematic inquiry, upon which, if you could agree some fundamental rules, then you could systematically understand where experimental truth, it's not absolute truth, but it is a way of proceeding on the basis of being able to demonstrate that a particular fact is replicable. That is the great advantage of the physical sciences. Well, what we have discovered this century, and particularly over the last 10 years, is that human beings are energy systems, not fundamentally psychological systems. And that is an amazing shift. And I want to bring that to you as the central observation of this presentation, because it has huge implications, I think, for how we think about organizations. Because what we are hiring in any organization is energy. But the person who comes is a self-regulating system. And so the big question for an organization is, how do I get that energy flowing in terms of the strategic and operational goals of the organization? Think of a really beautiful river, not particularly large perhaps, a river that is flowing well, that it's full of aquatic life, the fish are feeding well. It is flowing with clean water towards whatever its own objectives are, downhill. It flows. And think of the same river that has been neglected, not properly cared for, is choked with weeds, and the water becomes stagnant. It has great difficulty flowing through. I think many organizations are run on the basis of a stagnant river, that somehow applying one's energy is extraordinarily difficult. Why is that the case? Well, the 20th century, let me talk a bit more about Newton to start with. A very quick memory. Newton's first law, an object will not change its motion unless a force acts on it. In the second law, the force on an object is equal to its mass times its acceleration. And in the third law, when two objects interact, they apply forces to each other of equal magnitude and opposite direction. I suspect you've got some distant memories of those from school physics. Well, Newton's first law, an object will not change its motion unless a force acts on it. That's called management these days. A person will not change what they are doing unless a force acts on it. In the second law, the force on an object is equal to its mass times its acceleration. That seems to be called HR. HR has huge responsibility for channeling the energies of its people. But if it doesn't actually have a working model of what a person is, sometimes the force that is applied by HR actually hinders the process rather than contributes to it. And then we've got executive stress and burnout. I just wanted to put that in as a way of saying we can begin to think about what we've understood for the last 385 years about human energy, 335 years. We can begin to think about energy and shift some of these concepts towards the human being. Because I am by background a psychologist. I qualified at the Institute of Psychiatry at the Maudsley Hospital in London in 1962, long time ago. And I was part of the development
Screen has frozen.
I think a little bit of a glitch on Paul's side. So we are very sorry for this little bit of a technical glitch. You have to understand that Professor Brown has worked in the field of psychology for 50 years, which is almost as old as I am. So since he's having a technical problem again, we're requesting Dr. Nandini Das, the Executive Director of IN Consulting, to just carry on with his lecture for the next 10-15 minutes. Dr. Nandini?
Anupama, thank you very much. And this is really unfortunate because
No
Dr. Paul Brown was on a very, very important track with the group. And on such a short notice, I'm wondering what I can say to this group which will make sense. There, Dr. Paul is here.
Professor Brown, if you can just share the PPT on the side or mail it to me, I'll run it for you.
Forgive me just a moment.
Yeah, or just simply mail it to Nandini. I'll run it for. We'll quickly run it for you. If you're having a problem with the PPT.
It's not the PPT. We've got a huge electrical storm has come in on top of us as well, so we're just having a bad technical downflows.
I suggest Dr. Paul just speak to the audience instead of
Yeah. Before we lose you again, we must listen to your thoughts.
Yes.
Okay. If that happens again, I will just go on speaking. Have you got my screen again?
Not really. If you can.
Okay. Are you okay? Well, I'm terribly sorry, everybody. We've had both an electrical outage and a huge electrical storm has come over us, and it interferes with our connections. But we're back. So I was making the point when we got cut off that human beings are fundamentally energy systems, not psychological systems. So there is an enormous amount of teaching, writing, thinking about psychology, but psychologists have never agreed on some fundamentals. What is a person? What is this extraordinary thing called the self? And in the absence of that kind of agreement, different psychologists have different views, but we haven't, as psychologists, developed a method of agreeing what are the working truths that we would start from. And so psychology, as I say, is a set of propositions rather than, I think, a true science. But the modern brain sciences are making it possible through the new subject of applied neuroscience to develop new ways of understanding the complexities of organizational behavior and the essential tasks of leadership. And the second big discovery of this century is that what controls each of us fundamentally is our emotional system, not our thinking system. And if you hyphenate the word emotion into E-motion, then we can see that embodied in that word, which often has pejorative overtones, particularly for men. Oh, he's being emotional, she's being emotional, don't be emotional. We are all fundamentally E-motional. Energy is what creates action, and the energy which organizes our brain comes from the emotional system, backed up, of course, by the physical processes of us needing oxygen and needing glucose. But that oxygen and glucose fundamentally powers the emotional system, first of all. And then our thinking system gets attached to language as we develop, is there to tell us an account of what our brain already knows. So we are not controlled, and we do not control ourselves by our thinking system. Our thinking system lets us know what our brain has already decided. Because if you think about it, we could not have a thought about something that did not already exist. That's a profound discovery of this century. So it's my brain, not me, that manages me. And so every person that is involved in the organization is being managed by their own independent operating system. Now, the brain is the organ of adaptation, one way of thinking about it. Another way of thinking about it is it's the organ of relationship. It is always doing its best for you, always. If it were not always doing its best for you, we wouldn't know when it was not doing its best and we couldn't rely on it. But it can only do its best for you on the basis of the experiences that it has had or that you have had, because the brain is the storehouse of experience. And so if one finds oneself in a situation for which one has had no prior experience or expectation, all the brain can tell you is, I don't know what to do round here. Or the brain can become exhausted, which these days we call stress. And one more thing about the brain, it never makes mistakes. Of course, for all of us, we may look back on something and say, oh, that was a mistake. Why didn't we know before whatever the action was that we retrospectively call a mistake? Why didn't we know it was a mistake? It's because until we've actually committed to the action, the brain can't categorize whatever it is we're thinking about because it hasn't had the emotion of experience attached to it. We may make a decision and 2 or 3 seconds later we say, absolutely the wrong thing to have done. Why didn't we know that 2 or 3 seconds ahead? Of course, some people have got a great capacity to imagine forwards. They can almost feel their way into the future. And those people can often make extremely good decisions forwards for organizations. But many people try to make their judgments about organizations based on the way the figures are coming out. But actually, figures are historical events, not forward-looking. Yet some people have a very fine capacity to feel the figures. They can see patterns. I have a colleague in a charity that I chair in the UK, and he has a long experience of looking at organizations. He's an accountant by training. I'm staggered at the way he can feel figures. You can look at a set of accounts and know there's something not quite right about them. And then he can find out why it is that he knows. But he knows on the basis of highly defined, highly developed aesthetic about what the numbers mean. But the brain, whenever you make a decision, it is the only decision you could have made. Otherwise, it would have made another decision, the only decision it could have made. Extraordinary. And so, what does the 21st century leader need to know about the brain? The 21st century leader needs to know what are these things called the emotions and how do they drive behavior? There are 3 things the person needs to know. What are the emotions and how do they drive behavior? And secondly, how does the brain work and generate mind? And thirdly, how to understand your people and how did each person become the person that she or he became? And when we're thinking about the development of individuals, new graduates coming in, somebody moving from a mid-senior position to a more senior position, somebody moving from their zone of comfort, I'm a marketing person, I'm an accountant, I'm a salesperson, and being put into full profit responsibility as a CEO. How do we engage with that person in such a way that we know what's happening inside them in such a way that we can help their development, not just expect that anybody can do it. Of course, you've been a high achiever, go and do another bit of high achieving. Shift from being head of sales into being CEO of an operating subsidiary. Completely different role. Is it in that person? Or is the whole of their own development so strong in relation to the path that they'd chosen and their capacity to generate sales that actually the shift into working through other people and understanding other people, not just doing high-level deals, but actually mobilizing other people? How is that? How is that? And so I want to suggest to you that there are 8 basic emotions, and you could arrange these in the form of a fan. The first one I want you to think of is surprise and startle. You're coming to this session today. I wonder what it's going to be like. Will it be a waste of time? Will he tell me anything new? I'm quite interested in this topic. I'm looking forward to it. Those are little bits of the surprise, startle emotion. And if you want to draw a diagram while I'm talking, draw a fan with a baseline to it, a Spanish fan, as if it was open. And at about the 2 o'clock position, put a line that says surprise startle. And surprise startle sets you up for working out what's going to happen next. And we're now going to go leftwards around the fan. The first emotion that I want to touch on is fear. Fear which creates flight. The second one, at about the 11 o'clock position, is anger. I'm just going to go around the fan. The third one, at about the 2 o'clock position to the 3 o'clock position, is disgust. Then there is shame. And then at the full 3 o'clock position is sadness. So we've got 5 emotions: fear, anger, disgust, shame, and sadness, that are the escape avoidance emotions, the survival emotions, the emotions that got us here. They can be seen in all the higher mammals, in the great apes, in elephants, in dogs, in horses, maybe even in whales and porpoises. These emotions are the survival emotions that many organizations run of minor amounts of fear, anxiety, sometimes even anger, sometimes disgust. I'm troubled by the state that the British National Health Service is getting into, where when talks to members of staff, as I do from time to time, friends and colleagues, they're beginning to feel extremely sad about the current state of the NHS. Even can express some shame that they're part of it, because it's not, to their mind, functioning professionally in the way that they would wish it to function in many aspects. But the important thing about these emotions is that when they are operating, energy goes inwards. The energy goes, first of all, to looking after me. And so the energy is not available because the human being, and the brain particularly, the human being works off about 95 watts of energy. The brain works off about 25 watts. The brain is only 4% of body mass. So it's a hugely energy-hungry system. It takes nearly a third of the available energy in the body. But when that energy is triggering the fear, anger, disgust, shame, sadness, emotions, the energy goes into looking after me. It's not available or a large part of it is not available for the aims and objectives of the organization. I can be in the business, but I'm actually in a state of presenteeism, not really creative energy. Now, if we go to the right-hand side of our fan, we've got two great areas of the best human emotion. Excitement, joy is one, and trust, love is another. Excitement and joy, and trust and love. And with those, energy flows out into relationship, into activity. How can we run an organization which is fundamentally based upon quiet excitement and quiet joy, real trust, and I love coming to work? The problem is that those emotions, what we call the attachment emotions, the emotions under which we thrive, as against just survive, those emotions that drive us are easily switched off by the escape avoidance emotions, fear, anger, disgust, shame, and sadness, because the escape avoidance emotions have got primary survival value. Thrive emotions don't have primary survival. They are wonderful. They help our immune system amazing. They are to do with being creative, to do with enjoyment of life. But they can be switched off very fast by the primary survival emotions. And so the whole of our nervous system is geared up around these emotions because we come into the world with these emotions ready to be triggered. They're actually operating in the last 3 months of pregnancy. But let's just take it from day one. You will all know from all your experience of infants that the baby communicates through its emotions. And these 8 basic emotions are waiting to be triggered by whatever the baby's experience of the world is. Really good parents who understand what is going on inside the baby and respond to the baby in terms of its needs and do that on a highly reliable basis, create in that baby a great sense of security. But there are parents who are angry, they are themselves distressed, they have very little time, they may be exhausted, they may all kinds of things in which the baby experiences an inconsistent parent. How do we, as adults, in our organizational life, particularly as leaders, as team leaders, as departmental heads, as chief executives, as chairmen, how do we create the environment in which other people's subordinate brain tune to our brain in such a way that it releases the energy of that person to achieve organization? How do we do that? Let me talk a little bit about the working of the brain, first of all. There are 3 parts to the brain that we understand. One is the spinal column coming up into the bottom part of the brain. It's called the snake brain. If you think of a snake, it's got a long spinal column, a little brain on the top. It does everything to keep that brain alive. And we, from an evolutionary perspective, have got a brain that keeps us alive. It's making all our body systems work. We know very little about it in consciousness until it goes wrong. And if it goes seriously wrong, we die. The snake brain looks after us all the time in terms of our bodily functions. But about the time the big dinosaurs were dying out, the biggest reptiles that there were, very small brains, huge, long messaging system to get to that brain, very slow. They died out. They couldn't adapt. Biologist in America in 1975 said, what happened to the brain when mammals first appeared? And you will all know from school biology that the special thing about mammals is that they have live young. But this chap McLean said, yes, but it's not only they have live young, because some fish do, so some other animals do. What happens in mammals is there is a period in which the relationship between the mother and the live young is crucial for survival. In puppies, it's about 3 months, 2 to 3 months. In lions and tigers, it's about 2 years. In children, take your bet. In the UK at the moment, it feels to be about 24 years. But the process of the relationship in shaping the brain is profound, because as the brain begins to be stimulated, particularly in the first 3 years of life, the connections in the brain are made that are fundamental to the long-term operating of the brain. And then the experiences of beginning to go out in the world at school, beginning to go out to the world as an adolescent, the hormonal shifts which happen during adolescence, the settling down, aged 18, 19, into the first appearance of the fully functioning brain, which happens aged 23, 24. That brain is being shaped over a long period of time, and what happens to it is crucial for the way it will operate. You see, we've only got 5 senses, haven't we? Sight, sound, smell, taste. Those 4 senses, if you think about where they are in your head, in your face, very close together. And then we've got touch, which extends to the whole of the skin surfaces of the body. And in the brain, there are 86 billion brain cells, all of them creating patterns of activity based on experience, triggered by little electrical discharges that release chemicals. And so the brain is a very complex electrochemical network. We can go into more detail about that, but I just want to give you a sense that the patterns in the brain that come from experience are intensely individual. How do we find people for an organization that has a set of values in which the person coming into the organization might have the kinds of experience which already have those values? Or if this particular brain doesn't have those values, what are we going to do inside the organization that actually makes that person incorporate not just the words, but the real meaning of the value, so that it gets expressed in behavior? Because the value will be emotionally driven, not cognitively driven. You can all agree to the set of values printed on the wall behind the reception desk as we come into the organization. Oh, yeah, they're nice. Do we live them? Have we embodied them in our real experience? Do the key people in the organization, the chief executive, heads of departments, team leaders, do they live them? Do we see them? We, the subordinates in the organization, who are dependent upon the organization for our well-being in all kinds of ways. And I think the 21st century sustainable organization is going to come to a realization that the fundamental contract between the individual and the organization is about the nature of a gift. The organization has in its gift the possibility of a salary. The individual, not only a salary, but a sense of belonging, a sense of having something that I can say, this is where I work, I'm part of. And if that organization has a profoundly good set of values which it lives, if that organization actually believes in itself, if that organization actually has got aims and objectives which feel fundamentally worthwhile, Ah, what a delight to belong. But that's in the gift of the organization. What is in the gift of the individual is me, how I come to work every day, willing or less than willing to give of myself. Because the organization cannot command me. It can command me to be there, but it cannot command me. I am a self-regulating system, but it can create the conditions under which I give of myself. Now, there are two areas in the brain. If you can imagine putting your fingers just in front of, about on your temples, fingers on each side of your temples, and then fingers poking to in your eyes, where the line coming from your fingers on your temples and the line coming on from your fingers pointing to your eyes, where those lines meet inside your head, there's an area of the brain on each side of the brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala are like profoundly sensitive radar systems. They have the job when a baby is born of assigning emotion to experience. The baby comes into the world with the 8 basic emotions ready to be triggered. The amygdala sorts out which emotion is going to be assigned to which experience. The smile of a mother creates in the baby a sense of the attachment emotions, joy. You will have all experienced approaching a baby who smiles, its eyes glow, it opens its arms to you. The presence of that particular face has been attached by the baby's amygdala to the presence of this face. And then the mixing of the emotions creates feelings. It's like an artist's palette. The artist mixes just 3 primary colours. And all the great painters in the world have come from just 3 primary colours. We can detect in paintings the work of a particular artist. They have a particular style, in the way that from within one family, we can see that people are rather more like each other in terms of their behavior, their expectations, the way they walk, the way they smile, all kinds of things, than the family next door. As a child, age 10, 12, 13, 14, you go into a friend's house, you can feel it's different from my house. Not only in terms of its physical arrangements, but in terms of the emotional arrangements that operate. I'm growing, and it's the amygdala who are in charge the whole time. And so when we're grown up, the amygdala are on constant alert as to fundamentally where is danger. But once the amygdala knows that it's okay around here, then the whole of the brain can begin to work freely. It can flow. And it's flow of energy inside organizations towards the strategic and objective goals that we want. And so it's the functioning of the brain that creates this curious thing called mind. And again, if you've got a paper and pencil and want to draw something very simply, draw an equilateral triangle, the base of the triangle just sitting on the horizontal, and there is a triangle in front of you. And up the left-hand side of the triangle, scribble the word information. And down the right-hand side of the triangle, scribble the word energy. And across the bottom of the triangle, scribble the word relationship. And in the middle of the triangle, put the word mind. It looks as if we understand that another person's mind is operating because of the way information, energy, and relationship are continuously dynamically flowing together. But certainly in the Western world, and I suspect it's true generally over many commercial organizations throughout the world, what we're at risk of doing is maxing on information, huge amounts of data, putting numbers onto everything, often inappropriately. It's called the McNamara fallacy. Putting numbers onto things, maxing on information, having often remarkably little concern for energy, and over-particularizing relationships. We want to control relationships very often. We specify how people are to behave around here. It takes energy for the person to stop being me and to be the me that is required for me. And then that me energy is not available for the actual objectives of the organization. And so part of the future for me of HR is how do we construct organizations in which our HR as a continuous regard for and responsibility for the way energy is flowing inside the organization with these primary qualities of how is information flow working here in terms of overload? How do we actually ensure that energy, to the best of our ability to create the conditions under which energy. One of the things about the COVID period is that I've had occasion to talk with a number of people sitting in essentially empty offices and looking down some of these vast offices with little cubicles, white light, and bleak space. I think, gosh, what opportunity there is to completely redesign office space in such a way that it feels like welcoming space, not where I'm a battery hen, or it's as if I'm a cow being put into a stall and whatever my capacities are being milked from me. How could we create a visual environment in which, as I come into the office, I feel, oh, it's a good place to be. Not just breakout rooms, bit of a coffee bar, slightly more comfortable chairs. How could I have working space which actually stimulates the imagination or just relaxes the body in such a way that then I've got most energy available for what the organization wants?
Professor Brown, if I may interrupt you, the students have now to go to another class. So if you could have concluding remarks, please.
Right. Then very quickly, how to become the kind of leader that could lead in this new brain-based world. There are 5 elements that I want to give you very quickly. The first is the capacity to connect to other people. We don't know what the physics of interpersonal connection is, but we know it when it's there. The second quality is being courageous in all kinds of ways, doing what you know is right, not just what you're told is right. And then accepting that being clever enough will do. You can always hire clever people. Be clever enough. Know where the clever people can help you. Walk your own talk. Live the values that you have and inspire others into action. That's what I call the limbic leader. Connect, courageous, clever enough, walking your own talk, inspiring others into action. And in consequence of that, others will trust you. And once they trust you, their brains will tune to you, and then their energy will flow in the direction that you want their energy to flow in. They give you, their brains give you their energy because you are experienced as a person worth trusting. You can't command trust from another person any more than you can command love, but you can create the conditions under which you are trustworthy. And then you have the capacity to release the energies of other people in pursuit of the strategic and operational goals of the organization. And there we are, quickly brought to an end. I shall send these slides to Dr. Anupama, and then you can have a look at them in your own time. I'm so sorry for the technical interruptions. But thank you for letting me part of Amity Business School for this session and the invitation to be present with you. And thank you to all of you as participants.
Thank you so much, Professor Brown. I'm sure the students have gained such a lot, and thank you so much for your time. Until next time, thank you so much.